What's going on, everyone? Jacob from the Dry Paint Pot, and in today's video I'm going to teach you the cheap and easy way to rebase your models without really rebasing them. So stick around. Now, this video is actually a viewer request by Zariart. They write, cool tutorial, the challenge of saving your Deathwatch bases in a cheap and quick way would be interesting. A tutorial on how to save bases instead of replacing them, etc. I think that's a really cool idea. Backtracking a bit, if you've seen my video on basing, you know that I really hate my Deathwatch bases. I just can't stand them. None of them match, and a lot of them look really bad. So I'm considering rebasing my entire Deathwatch army, which is going to take me forever. Now, for those out there who are in a similar predicament, you might not have the time to rebase your entire army. So finding a way to rebase the model without prying them off the base and completely starting from scratch will save you a ton of time, a ton of money, and a ton of effort. So to do this, I have a very ugly Deathwatch chaplain who I based ages ago. I kind of just threw a bunch of little rocks that I found in my backyard on there, a little bit of astro granite, and yeah, I always thought he looked really out of place, especially because these stones that I use on here, I really don't use on a lot of my other bases, except for maybe my Terminators. But he looks very out of place, and the rocks just don't blend in with the astro granite at all. So I'm going to try to salvage as much as I can here and see what I can do with it. So let's get things started. All right, so here's the chaplain that I'm working on today. And as you see, this base is pretty nasty looking. Nothing really matches. It definitely doesn't match my army. And the very first thing that I need to do is consider the theme that I'm going to pick as I rebase him. You see, if I go in a totally opposite direction with him, or I go a little too extreme, I'm going to be spending a lot of time on rebasing him. I'm going to spend a lot of money on supplies, and that's not what we're trying to do today. We want it to be as quick as possible and also as cheap as possible, but we also want him to look good. So looking at the model, I see that he steps on this like stone right here. It's got like a little cog in it, and I'm going to use that to pick my next theme. For instance, I wouldn't want to do some kind of beach theme because you don't often see big stones like this at the beach. So what I'm going to try to do is a sort of like infected Mars theme. Something red, maybe a little bit of green, maybe some slime or ooze, something kind of nasty. But first things first, we need to get all of these little rocks off of here and get the base fairly clean. But we do want to keep a lot of the texture that's already on here so we don't have to fully rebase. Oh man, I don't want to do this. Don't mind me just picking off a couple hours of effort. You guys have no idea how much this pains me to just, oh man, that's on here pretty good. You have no idea how much it pains me to destroy something I worked so hard on at one point. Oh wow, that's so easy. Not moving. I don't know what I did to put him down. Probably way too much super glue, and I don't even know what else I could use at the time. Definitely not like green stuff or anything like that. Okay. There's bendies. Okay. Let's see.
Wait, SpongeBob! We're not cavemen! We have technology!
Wow. I don't know. Oh, there we go. Holy. Look at all that super glue I had on there. God, no wonder I couldn't get it off. Okay, you know, surprisingly, without all these rocks, this is already looking kind of better. As cool as I thought the rocks were at the time, I think they're kind of an eyesore. I think when I was thinking about it, I think this was like about the third set of models that I painted. I started with the Start Collecting of Death Watch. I moved on to the Space Marine side of the Dark Imperium, and then I got the Kill Team Cassius, and that's Cassius, however you want to pronounce it. But that's where he came from. Now that all the rocks are off of here, I have a general idea of how I want to do this. I want to do a couple little divots, like little holes, like craters, that I can fill with some kind of like green ooze or slime, and then I want to do just the rest nice and textured and red. So to do that, I'm going to use a bit of Agrellan Badland, some Agrellan Earth, and where's it at? Some green stuff. Now to keep this drying fairly fast, because green stuff does take a little bit of time to cure, we want to use more of the blue than the yellow. You see, the blue will make it a little more brittle, which is the downside, but it will dry faster, which means we can paint over it and get this thing finished quicker. Oh yeah, you can tell a big difference with the green stuff being mostly blue. It's like way tackier, kind of hard to mix, and yeah, it's super firm, as you can see. All right, so I've never made these craters with green stuff before, but we're just gonna throw down a thin layer on here and see what happens. While I do not have any sculpting tools to smooth any of this out, I do have my handy dandy blade, and I do have some, although it's a little dirty, some water. And if I just wet this blade and use it on the green stuff, it shouldn't stick, and we can just get some of this smoothed out. This way it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. All right, now with that smoothed out, I've decided I want just a little bit more on the top so I can get a nice deep divot. Let me just wet some of this remaining green stuff over here. Now, usually green stuff is tacky for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, but with our higher ratio of blue over yellow, it's going to dry faster, so we need to just add a little bit of water and kind of knead it. This way it doesn't dry out as quick. I don't know what the new drying time is now that we used a lot more blue in the mix, but it's definitely dried up a bit in the last few minutes, so I'm guessing not very long. All right, now that that side is looking pretty good, just want to do the same thing on the other side, but just not as wide, probably to cover up all this super glue right here. Just gonna throw a little dot down, kind of mash it a bit. Again, smooth out the sides. All right, so once that's down, now we can just find something to poke a little hole in it. I do have an old paintbrush. Don't mind me as I dig through my bag of brushes. There we go. I have an old paintbrush whose bristles all fell out. So I'm just gonna use that and poke a few holes in here. And again, just using the water so nothing sticks. For those of you who are tryptophobic, I sincerely apologize. There we go. So we're just gonna give this just a few minutes to dry. Again, I wanna work as fast as possible, but green stuff does contract. So if I add paint on it right now, it's most likely going to shrink and all the paint is going to crack, but we are using a paint that does crack. So I don't know how that's gonna interact with the green stuff. By now, many of you should know how impatient I am, so I'm not gonna wait for this to completely dry. I know that's probably a bad idea, but I've got a good feeling and I think it's gonna be all right. And you know what? If it ends up horrible, then it's kind of like what I do, make the mistakes of my models so you don't have to. So we're just gonna test to see if you can just start painting over this stuff with some technicals, and by the time it dries, if it's wrecked, then we'll know not to do that. So the next thing we want to do is just take some of this Agrellan Badland, yeah, and we're just gonna put it all over any of these little craters that we made. Now we do not want to apply this too thick, because if we do, it will take forever to dry. So just thin enough to where it covers everything well, and thick enough to where it's not showing too much of the green, although we will paint this briefly. Now that we have the craters covered, we're gonna let this dry for about maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll throw down the base coat and start getting some color on it. All right, so I ate a quick dinner, watched a little bit of Netflix, and I came back to find that all the paint that I threw down on the little craters has cracked. I should have known. I kind of predicted it earlier when I was talking about how this stuff is probably going to keep contracting and shrinking, but I think we can use this to our advantage. You see, I was going to use the agrellan earth, which is a technical that naturally cracks, to paint all over these craters, but since it already cracked, I think I can just leave it as is and still get a very similar effect. So even though it's still shrinking and cracking, I'm going to start doing a base coat on this. And if it shrinks and we can see some of the green underneath, what I'll do is throw a little bit of a wash on top, maybe a Nuln Oil or Agrax Earthshade, and that should seep into all the spaces that's showing the green underneath. So the first color we're using today is going to be corn red. We're going to get a nice base coat over everything, including this little rock that he's stepping over. And then we'll follow up with a dry brush of some orange. I think it's Troll Slayer orange. Now we're starting off with a small brush just to get all of the spaces around the feet so we don't bump into any of the black armor when we use a larger brush. If you don't know what type of brushes to have in your arsenal, I always suggest a larger brush, something that can hold a decent amount of paint, and then a smaller brush with a decent tip. Now this one doesn't have a great tip. I do have some new brushes coming in, but this is sort of the best that I have at the moment. But those are the two that you should definitely have. Too small of a brush, and it's not going to be very practical in a lot of the parts of the model because it's going to take you forever to throw down just one coat of paint, and too big, and you'll just be adding way too much paint to the model. Now, as we do have a lot of texture on this base, you might notice that it's quite difficult to get the paint to settle into all the recesses. So what I like to do is add a little extra water to your paint and just let it seep into all the spaces where you want paint to be. Because our paint is quite thin, it may require an additional layer or two, but that's okay, because it shouldn't take too long to dry. Now that our first layer is down, we're going to give this just a few minutes, and then once it's fully dry, we're going to throw another layer or two down just to get a solid base coat. Now before we dry brush, I'm going to do a wash of Nuln Oil and let all this black wash settle into all the recesses. And this will really make all the texture stick out. Now we don't want to go overboard with it and let it pool too much, because that's not the look I'm going for, but with just a light wash you can see how it really makes all that texture pop. Now I will add a little more wash to this stone that Cassius is stepping on, just to make it really stand out and catch the eye. Now this video is just a lot of drying, so we're going to let this all dry and then do a dry brush. And while we're waiting for that to dry, let me talk about what I'm using to dry brush. Now, this is just a cheap makeup brush that I got off of Amazon for probably $5.99. Now, I should have bought more expensive ones that were a lot softer, but let me tell you why I'm using makeup brushes. You see, Adam from Tabletop Minions, if you're familiar with his channel, he suggested that you use them for blending and for dry brushing. Now, I was a little skeptical at first. I wasn't sure why it was necessary, but if you see on my, if you see on these Necrons over here, I use this method of blending and dry brushing, and they look really good. I'm very happy with them. Let me get the, I think this is the Scorpec Destroyer, I believe. Now I did all of this with dry brushing with the makeup brush, and I'm very, very happy with the end result. So these things are my new best friends. If you're looking for a decent dry brush and you want to blend things well, then makeup brushes are where it's at, and the softer the better. Now, onto the dry brushing. What we're gonna do is get some paint onto here. And then we're gonna keep a paper towel on the side and just try to get a majority of that off. And we really want just a little bit on there. Now to bring down all of this Rise of Rust, I'm gonna add a little bit of Astral Wrath Red. And just tone down some of these orange highlights. Also, the Astral Wrath Red is much brighter than the corn red that we added for the base coat. So it's gonna give even more depth to this model. Now, when I did this, I did not clean my dry brush or use a different one because I want all the colors to blend so that they come together naturally. And look at the really cool colors that we're getting now. And I can't help myself. We're gonna use some Uriel yellow and just really brighten this thing up. You see, I mentioned this in my Discord, but a lot of my models back in the day had very muted and dull colors. And it seems to be like a trend where a lot of beginner painters like to use darker muted colors, but it's okay to just go nuts, like to really go crazy with your colors, to get nice and bright with it. Plus, if it's too bright, you can always wash it down or do a little bit of glazing to bring it down. And there we go. That looks really nice. Now that our base is almost complete, we just need to fill in these little craters. Now I was going to just use Nurgle's Rot, but I don't like how dull it looks. So I'm gonna add in a little bit of the new Citadel Color Tesseract Glow, and hopefully that'll brighten it up and just make it look really nice. Now you can just see how thick and goopy this stuff is. And that's the effect I want. And this is much, much thinner. And I think it would just be too thin to add in on its own. So to mix it, I just have some tin foil here. We're just gonna get a nice little glob like that. It's probably way too much, but that's okay. And we're just gonna add in some of this and see what we get. Ew. Ew, that's kind of gross. I didn't expect it to look like, it looks like throw up a little bit. Ugh. All right, it's thinned down, but it's not too thin. So we're just gonna want to take this and really just goop it on up in there. Now this stuff does shrink, so you're gonna want to add a little extra in there. This way when it does shrink, you can still see it. And there you have it, a brand new base in like an hour 45, 2 hours. So this is like video number 16, I think it's probably 16. And out of 15 videos, by the end, I'm usually all excited. I'm like, oh man, that was great. I hope this helps you out, you know, yada, yada, yada. Well, this is the first time I'm actually not excited by the end of the video. I'm actually a little disappointed, a little like, ugh. Oh my God. All right, so this model, the one that we just got done with, I really like this base. I like this base a lot. And just maybe a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I ordered a massive order from Green Stuff World. I mean, well over $100 worth of stuff, and it's coming in on Monday. And all of that stuff is for rebasing my Death Watch. And I have this whole theme planned out. But that's gonna require a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of scraping up bases, and I like this better. I actually think that I like this theme better. And this took me like almost 2 hours? And I was able to keep most of the texture on the base and just add a few things. So thank you, Zariart, for helping me find this awesome new base theme. But now I regret my massive purchase that I just made. God dang it. That's pretty much how things happen in this hobby, at least for me. It's like you have a big plan for one thing, and then all of a sudden you just like stumble into something new, and you're like, oh my God, no, this is what I need to do. But I've already done all of this. Man, so on the bright side, I'm super happy with this. I really like where this went, and thank you so much for the video request. If you guys have any other suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. Now let's check out this week's viewer submissions. Now this biker is by Igleham, I-G-L-H-A-M, and it looks really, really good. I'm super excited to see the new bikers painted because I'm still working on mine, and this one turned out really awesome. The non-metallic metals look really, really good, and the base is simple but very clean. And for some more bikers, it makes me just want to like stop doing the video and just like run to my Indominus box, finish building them and get them painted. These guys look awesome. I'm super excited to see some white scars on the table, and I really hope that more people start to bring them now that we have these new bikers. But these guys look so good. The bases are a little more extravagant, but they're really dirty and dusty, which really match the whole theme. And although these Primaris models are new, I really like to see how they look kind of beat up and worn already. Like, you know, they've been part of a giant battle and they're already really rugged and just have been through it. Oh, and I forgot to say, these are by Gazkill. Awesome job. And this Plague Marine is by Sevart. And I know it's not painted yet, but I'm really excited to see it once it is painted. So hey, Sevart, get to it, get it painted, tag me in the next picture because I'd love to see it when it's done. Now, if you'd like to support the channel or just hang out and talk about the hobby, I have a link to my Discord and my Patreon in the comment section below. And also, feel free to share any of your work with me both on Instagram and Facebook at The Dry Paint Pot. I pick my favorites each week and I feature them in my upcoming videos. Now, I'm gonna go find out what Green Stuff World's return policy is, but in the meantime, wash your brushes, clean your paint pots, and keep on painting.